Welcome to the RFP Success Show with host Lisa Rehurek, the #1 sought-after authority on RFP success. Each week, we bring you information, strategies, or resources to help you win more business through RFPs and have a little fun doing it. Let's get this week's episode started.
Hello, everybody. This is Lisa Rehurek, your host of the RFP Success Show, founder and CEO of the RFP Success Company. And today I'm talking to you about debriefs and why they are so important and really what the structure of debriefs should look like. Debriefing is one of those things that I find that companies either do really well or they don't do at all. And the companies that are doing really well with it are the ones that have a really good solid process. They're collecting the data, they're learning from that information, and it's really helping them in their continued culture of a winning, their continued quest for a winning RFP culture. And that's what I want to help you with for those of you who maybe are not as strong. And for those of you who do this really well, maybe I'll give you some nuggets here that you don't already do. Or, come out to my Facebook page, come out to the LinkedIn group, the RFP Success community out on LinkedIn and share that with us because you all have a wealth of information as well. So I'd love to hear your input. So let me talk about this. There are 3 areas that you should debrief. And the first area is internally upon submittal of your proposal. This tends to be something that a lot of people do. Quick little internal debrief. It's really important that you do this right away when it's fresh in everybody's minds. Yes, they might be frustrated, but those frustrations can also help, you can kind of help pull out pieces of the process that are validly concerning. It's also a really great time to talk about what went really well. What I find in these debriefs is that what we tend to do is focus on the negatives. We could have done this better. This should have gone better. The timeline, blah, 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 blah. All of the ifs, ands, or whats. But it's really important to have a success conversation. What did we do really well? What went better this time? If you're truly having those internal debriefs every time you submit an RFP, you're going to start noticing some patterns of improvement every single time. In these internal meetings, what's important is to keep everybody on track. I always suggest setting the stage up front and saying, look, we are here to talk about our strengths and our weaknesses and areas for improvement for the next one. We don't want to harp on things that are out of our control. I was in a debrief a couple of months ago with a team, and they spent 15 minutes talking about how badly written the RFP itself was, and so how hard it was to respond to it. That's just unproductive time because there's nothing you can do about that. What would be productive in that conversation, and which is where I steer the conversation, is to talk about what you could have done in the question and answer period to get clarification, to maybe let them know that it's a little confusing, and to get what you needed so that it would be easier for you to respond. So that's something that you can talk about, but please don't let the conversation get shifted into here are all the things that are completely out of our control. It's unproductive. It's a time waster. So I like to start with, where are some of the areas that we really struggled with? Where were the bottlenecks? That's one of the first questions I ask. Where were the big bottlenecks? Where was the biggest frustration? If there's anything you could have changed, what would that be? And actually, I have everybody answer that particular question. Generally, these meetings are open. Everybody can freely converse about this. It's kind of a brainstorming session. But that particular question, there's 2 questions actually that I always ask everybody. That is one of them. If you could have changed anything and made it better in the process, what would that have looked like? Keep control of the conversation. Don't let anybody start, kind of carrying it away with all their complaints. This is to be a productive meeting. Then shift into okay, that's great. Those are all the things we could do better next time. Then shift into what did we do really well? Maybe what did we do better than we did last time? Or what are some of the improved processes that we're seeing? What are some things that we continue to do really well? And make sure, by the way, that you have somebody in these meetings to document this, because this documentation is really important when you go into the next RFP, and I'll talk about that here in a second. but you've got to have somebody who's scribing, and it shouldn't be whoever's leading the meeting. And frankly, in a perfect world, it's somebody that isn't involved in responding either, because sometimes what happens is you're trying to get them to respond. They're thinking in two different ways. They're trying to scribe. So if you could bring somebody in completely outside that can scribe that, that would be really great. The reason that information is so important is because, well, all this information that we're going to talk about is important, but when you finish kind of taking all these notes on this particular RFP debrief, you're going to share this information, not all of it, but the key highlights in the next RFP. All right, here's some things that worked well last time. We want to continue doing them. Here are some things that we would like to avoid. Here's our solutions for those. And that really is going to help facilitate improvement. I mean, you guys, these might be little teeny tiny incremental improvements, but all of that builds up to a really well-oiled machine in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that looks like, depending on how big your team is. So make sure that you are really paying attention to that and documenting that. And then I also always suggest that at the end of the year, somebody go through all those debriefs and do a review. We've done this for some of our clients where they give us all of their debrief notes, and we go through and we complete a report for them that says, here's kind of what's working in your process. We do this mostly for companies that we help with revising and developing a good, strong process for them. We could do it for you if we didn't do that, or you can find other people that can really summarize that for you. All right, so that's really the first of 3 steps in the debrief process, which is that internal, within a week of submitting that, preferably, but no more than 2 weeks at the latest, okay? Now, the second debrief that you want is external with the client. And here's the kicker. You want to get that win or lose. So I see most companies that will do it when they lose because they want to know why they lost. But I know very few companies that just do that when they win. And we'll talk about why that's important. Not everybody's going to give you a debrief, but you have to try. And so if you're bidding on like state work, a lot of times they'll give you copies of the scoring sheets. If you're bidding on corporate work, that's usually a live conversation. They'll hop on the phone with you. They might not give you a ton of information, but they'll give you enough to at least get you started. And we're going to talk about some key questions you should be asking. So again, sometimes you're just going to get a written debrief and you just have to go off of that and you have to wade through it. Generally, when you get a written debrief like that, you can also get competitor proposals. Make sure you're doing that, because then you can look at how did the competitors talk about this particular area. I will tell you, I hear all the time from people, I don't know how they scored higher than us. We are so much deeper here. We have so much more depth here than they do. How did they beat us? Well, they just presented it better. They did a better job of convincing the evaluators that they were really good in that area. You might be as good as can be. You might be the best of the best of the best, but if you don't communicate that clearly and concisely and in a way that will resonate with the evaluators, they're not mind readers. They are not fortune tellers. That's on you. You've got to make sure that's right. But that's a great learning opportunity. When you get those scoring sheets back and you say, oh my gosh, how did we score adequate versus excellent in this particular area when we are excellent? That's an area you've got to go back and really revise and make sure that you are communicating that in the way to get that excellent score. Okay? Just because you are doesn't mean you're going to get the score. You've got to communicate it. So that external win or lose. Okay, so one of 3 things is going to happen. They're going to tell you no, flat out no. I would make sure that I ask them, is there any way that we could talk to somebody? If they say no, just say, look, all we're looking for is, 1 or 2 quick questions that somebody might be able to answer for us. They might still say no. So you're going to get that camp. The second camp, they're going to give it to you in writing only. And the third camp is that they will have a conversation with you. Conversations are great. Writing is great. Either way, you're going to get a lot of really good information that you can really use. Okay. The reason that it's important when you win is because just because you won does not mean that you were the ideal candidate. You might have just been the best of the worst, right? So I have had so many clients, one in particular that we just got a debrief on back last week. They didn't win because they didn't win. They won, but they didn't win because their proposal was great. They won because they were really the best of the three options that this company had, and they need somebody in there. So, you don't really want to be that, because then if that contract renews at some point, you're at risk of losing that. And if you don't know why you won, then you could get a little cocky. I'm not going to lie. People are like, well, we won that. We're all good. They love us, blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe once you get in there and you start working with them, they'll love you and all of that. But the next time that RFP comes out, or the next RFP you have to respond to, you don't want to be resting on the fact that that proposal that you submitted was a winning proposal. Because again, a lot of times that's not why you won. You also want to know, if you won solely on price. Because if you won only on price, then you don't really know how the rest of your proposal stacked up. And you want to be able to ask those questions. So you want to be able to ask, okay, aside from price, what stood out? What did you think was missing? Because you want to understand, again, the rest of that proposal. These are the ways that we can use these proposals for models for future proposals. One of my biggest pet peeves is that companies will use a winning proposal and draw on that for their next submittal when they didn't really understand what it was about that proposal that helped them win. So it's really important to debrief even if you've won. Some of the questions that you should be asking in that instance is, why did we win? Like if they say price, then dig a little bit deeper. Was there anything else that stood out to you? Was there anything in our proposal that concerned you? Was there anything that you didn't understand or that we did not express clearly? So some of those are questions that you should ask on the winning side. If you lost, you want to ask, what was kind of the key thing that the competitor had that we did not have? Did you find our proposal clear and concise? Were you able to understand our approach and our qualifications? What was it that caused us to not win this? And what can we do better for the next time? We really want to work with you. So those are some of the questions. The other thing about this whole debrief with your potential client, is that it's a relationship building opportunity. This is an opportunity to ask them some questions that you couldn't get ahead of time that will help you in the next round. And again, you want to be taking some really good notes. This is going to go into the same file as the internal debrief. And this is going to help you with your ongoing business development efforts with them. If they're a target for that RFP, they're probably an ongoing target. So you want to make sure that you capture all that information as them being your target, and also just for your overall knowledge that we've already talked about. So really, really important. And then the third piece of the debrief, which most people do not do, is that you should have a third debrief meeting, but a second internal meeting once you've had that external debrief. And that internal meeting should be quick. I'm saying 15 minutes to say, hey, here's what we heard. You could do this in email if you needed to, but a quick 10, 15-minute phone call would be better. Here's what we heard. Here's what we believe were our strengths in that. Here's what we believe were our weaknesses in that. Make sure, again, that's documented with the other debrief, and that it's an opportunity for people to learn from that. They will learn more from that verbal conversation than they will from that written conversation, or better yet, a combination of both of them. So that's really what you want to do. You want to make sure that you are having that debrief conversation internally, externally, and then again internally to kind of close that loop. There's a lot of people on the proposal team that generally don't ever get to hear what the client thought if you're having those live conversations. So don't leave them out of it. They're part of your team. They're invested. They're excited. And they get bummed out if they lose. So if you're kind of like a managing director, an owner, a business development person on the phone listening to this podcast, make sure you rope your proposal team in on that information that you gather, and not just the bad. I mean, share the good too. This is not about here's what we did wrong and here's what we did right. This is about here's where our strengths are, here's where we need to get better. And it's all about that learning opportunity. And that's what the debriefs really help support. There's really a lot to be learned with the debrief process if you do it right and if you're open to it and you document it well. It's hugely important to the success and the ongoing kind of that winning culture that I always talk about. In order to create that winning culture and that culture of success, you've got to do these things as annoying as they can be and as arduous as they can be. And it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be arduous. You've just got to carve out time to make it happen. And when you get into that rhythm, then it really will benefit you. So go forth and debrief for success. All right, everybody, thanks for being here. As always, we appreciate you. If you haven't joined the RFP Success Community on LinkedIn, please do so. The RFP Success Community, just do it in the search. You'll find us. I will approve you. We'd love to have more conversations with you out there. Have a great day, everybody. See you around next week.
You have been listening to the RFP Success Show with RFP expert Lisa Rehurek, author of the RFP Success book. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you click the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. And thanks for spending time with us today.